What's up, guys, and welcome back to the garage. Today is a big one. Finally getting the steps on the Jeep so the wife can get in and out of here way more easily. So what are we installing? The rock slide step sliders. Bit pricey. Originally I wanted to go with the RBP power steps, but there we go, for the truck over there, wanted those as well, weren't available. So I ended up doing the amp steps for the truck, and unlike when I put them on my Chevy, those amp steps on the Ram, I feel like they just haven't worn as well. Their fit was terrible. They did not go on the truck at all, no matter what I did, so I had to use some washers, space them out, clear the pinch weld. This time I didn't want to deal with the amp steps. Also for the Jeep, for some reason, the way they mount like in the middle bracket and not up front, and I didn't really care for that aesthetically, and I just felt like having something fold down and hang down without any support up front just seemed a little strange. So I really wanted the RBP steps, but again, also out of stock and unavailable, so I need a step for the wife to use her car. And these guys are purpose built for the Jeep, look great, and are functional, so I'm going to be putting those on today. The other thing that these rock slide steps have, which amp I don't think did, I know RBP did, is the ability to override them. So if you want to take the doors off, the steps don't simply deploy and stay deployed. So it's the ability, also if you're off-roading, you have the ability to turn them off, so if you open the door, the steps don't deploy into an obstacle. So with that said, I'm going to get this unboxed, lay everything out, and review everything with y'all in terms of what parts you need and what the first step will be to get them installed. Okay guys, as you probably guessed, the very first step when dealing with, well, the steps, eventually we're going to be connecting them to the battery. And the very first step is to disconnect the battery. Now, if you have a 4xe plug-in hybrid, there's an extra step because there's no alternator, and the battery will not simply be charged from the alternator. Normally, you don't have to care about this step because the alternator is only on when the engine's on. And if the battery's disconnected, the engine's obviously not started. So here it's a little different. The integrated dual charging thing is down between the drive shaft, that black area, and the exhaust, and that sends power to charge the battery, as well as the 12-volt battery, as well as the main 17 kilowatt battery. So even though the engine's off, this cable will still be getting charge from the IDCM even with everything disconnected. So to ensure we don't deal with that problem, we need to pull out a 5 amp fuse, and it's this one right here, right there, top right corner of the fuse box. It's the brown one. And then disconnect the battery as normal, negative first, positive second, then you're good to start working. Alright guys, I have the battery disconnected, the IDCM F09 fuse pulled out, and the first step is actually start running the wiring harness on the passenger side. And I'll make note, this wiring harness really quite impressive, much nicer than the one that came with the ARB. It's got sleeving the whole length down it. You run it along the top of the frame rail here. Now in a normal Jeep, this is a piece of cake because there's not a whole lot of stuff in here, but because this is a plug-in hybrid, it is full of stuff. So I have been able to snake the cable up over this factory harness that you see there, but haven't been able to successfully fish it up into the engine bay because I have all this plug-in hybrid electronic stuff in the way. What I was able to do is take the car's antenna, which I have replaced with a shorter rubber stubby one. This one I ran down, and I'm going to duct tape it to the wires and then hopefully be able to pull everything up and through. So once I get that done, I'll meet back up with you. Okay guys, I've gotten my wiring harness fished up through this non-existent gap somewhere in there. It took some doing. Used the Jeep's old antenna. This is the new one. If anyone's interested, I'll let you know which one this is. Hit me up on Instagram. and then, you know, some duct tape and the antenna, pushing and pulling, got it through. If you don't have a 4xe, this step will be a lot easier. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and utilize this left tower here where my thumb is to attach the hot, and then I'm going to use this post for ground, simply because nothing is connected to it. If there was a instance where I wanted to disconnect this guy and I was dumb enough to perhaps leave the engine running, then I wouldn't have to worry about shorting any of the other engine components out, and I'd only destroy this guy. Just a safety measure. Not that I would ever do that, but can't hurt since we have a free post here anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and connect the red to this, the black to ground, and then I'm going to use dielectric grease, which is what this is, for my red connection as well. When you are connecting this, make sure your fuse is out. You don't want to send power through the rest of the harness, since we're going to be working on that later. Okay, we are in the back of the Jeep now. Popped the plastic trim panels along this and this using a non-marring pry bar. It is best to get in here and push that way. These tabs hook into the side of the door, so don't pull up on it at all. Push this way. Push this way first on this one, then this one, and then in the back, if you have a 4xe, you have some T20 bolts to remove here. That then pops off this 4xe trim piece. It comes up, and then this piece down here will go forward, and just kind of get this loose enough to pull the carpet back here. This is the plastic cap that we're going to be going through to get the cables through. So we're going to go and try and pry that off next. The next step will of course be to take this grommet, put it in here, and run the door sensor cables through, one obviously to here and one to the front, and then the rest of the wiring harness will be run over the cross member to the driver's side. So I'm going to go ahead and get this popped out and get the cables pulled through. Okay, we are under the vehicle now, sort of near the passenger side front door. Before I poke through with the grommet, I wanted to mention there is a clip like this. It's meant to go around the harness and attach sort of like this. The harness will be there and it'll attach here. It is the forwardmost bolt hole on the passenger side body in front of these rectangular cutouts. Now this is the bolt where the Rubicon rock rails were that I just took off. So I'm going to be putting this clip and harness in here and then zip tying it to the frame rail all the way down the rest of the way. But this first one, it does come with this sort of nice little harness clip. So I'm going to use that now. Okay, here is the hole from the plastic plug. It's just kind of like a foam cement. It sits in there. Used a screwdriver to pry it loose, working it all the way around, similar to opening a paint can, really, just a little bit stickier. Grab your passenger side door sensors, these guys, and really just run them up through this hole. So I'll put the grommet on next, just to ensure the cables don't get sliced. Okay, the next step with the door sensors is to run them into place. This is the black and blue. This is going to be the front. This is the black and green, or the rear. So the black and green comes up through the hole underneath this plastic and then up behind this carpet. Now this carpet comes out after pulling this guy off. Now this guy pops on there pretty easily. You take off two 20 Torx bit screws and then use a non-marring pry bar in here like this, and then just pry it from the middle and it comes right out. So once you get that out, the carpet comes out pretty easily, and you can see in here where everything is, and this is where we're going to run this. So the next thing I'm going to do is just get this door sensor installed, which I have over here. Okay, once we have wiring harness ready to go, we are going to clean the area here, let that dry, grab our door sensor, and once that's dry, we're going to be installing the door sensor just like so. We will pull off this backing and then run the cable back behind here and down below. Once that's been put on, we can put the carpet back, put back the plastic trim piece here, and then work on getting the front one in. Okay, update on this. We've got the rear door sensor here. The magnet just sort of placed here till later. Once we've confirmed the steps work, I'll stick it there. The panel is still loose, obviously. This is the back one, this is the front one. Pop this fully, the D-pillar panel fully loose. Come to the front. You'll see I've snaked this connector out. We're going to put on the front door, put it back, put the trim pieces back, and then run the harness over to the driver's side. We are on the driver's side rather. Got this sensor in, got the harness brought over, the door sensor for the back brought up, the switch override for the whole assembly will be passed through up to the front there, so we're going to do that next. I've already got the driver's side, the driver's door rather, switch brought over and moved in place. So we are going to now run that all the way up this guy. And again, when you're opening these sort of trim pieces, push that way. And then once you get to here, we're going to feed the cable up sort of behind. Sorry, once you get to here, we're going to feed the cable behind this trim panel, behind this piece of wiring for the door, up towards the OBD2 port. So I'll meet back up with you once I've got this back up there. When we put these back together, basically they go back together the way they came apart. They just snap right back into place, so I'm going to skip over that because there's not really a whole lot to it. Okay guys, got all the trim pieces buttoned up. The override cable run up through here, and we are in the process of removing this screw from the OBD2 port bracket. We will then be adding this bracket that comes with the kit back to it. The screw is just going to go back in through this hole and then back into this bracket, with this hanging off to the side, sort of like this. Should be out of the way of the OBD2 port, obviously. So once I get that done, I'll show you how it looks. Okay, I have the bolt reassembled. Here's the bracket that comes with the kit. You just pass it through the larger hole in the bracket. The smaller hole is right here. It's a relief hole. This OEM stock bracket has a bump that the smaller hole is there to clear. This screw comes out, goes right back in. It's just an 8mm bolt. OBD2 has plenty of space here to be used for whatever is needed. This is much farther forward, and if you're wondering, this bracket does not, cut off or pinch any of these cables. These little cords here have plenty of space to move to the left. So we're going to go ahead and get the switch going next. Here is the little on-off switch that it comes with. It's just a 2-prong switch, and this cable comes with the 2 connectors. So all you need is to put these connectors on the switch, put the switch in the bracket. So I'll come back once that's done. Okay guys, I have the button in place, and I gotta say that is probably one of the better designed pieces of kit. Like, you don't even know it's there, and when you drop down here, it just looks factory. It is a really nice finish. It operates smoothly. The button in here, the back of it, you can plug the wires into either prong, it doesn't matter. And then you just snap it into place. Leave that on for now, and we're gonna go ahead and move on to getting the steps put in place. What's up, guys, and welcome back to day 2 on the Rock Slider Gen 3 step and rail install. I got the driver's side step done late last night around 10 o'clock. Didn't have a chance to film much of it, but I did learn a few things that I now have the chance to explain and pass on to you as I go. So far, I will show you kind of the finish. Overall has been pretty dang good. I like the overall fitment, the way it operates. I tested that briefly last night. Here it is, you know, installed on the Jeep, and it looks really nice. And even though the fuse isn't in right now on these steps, this is actually quite helpful getting in and out, even without using the part that drops down. So if you were off-roading and you've got the step turned off on the override, still use this to a great advantage. So there's only one issue I'll say with quality control on the whole process that I've had up to this point. Everything else has gone pretty smoothly in terms of the kit that comes in the mail that you get. I have had a few issues with the install of the wiring harness, trying to get that to clear around or away from the body. There's very little clearance between the body and all of the hybrid components. So if you've got a plug-in hybrid, you're going to be really tight for space getting the harness fished across the Jeep from the passenger side over the rear cross members of the driver's side. Other than that, everything's gone pretty dang well, except for what I'm about to show you. So these are the 3 brackets that mount to the body bolts, and these 2 there's no problems with. I noticed on the other side I had an issue with one of the bolts, and this one it looks like we're gonna have an issue with 2. If you flip these over, you'll see that these sort of square-sided nuts are tack welded in position on one corner. All 4 of them are. And coming down from the top, you'll see these 2 are perfectly, not necessarily perfectly, but they're clearanced properly enough where you can easily get the bolt, you know, in here and it threads no problem. These 2, you can tell that the nut is too far to the right on both of these, and I've already tested, and this will not go through. I ended up wrenching on this last night, and in an attempt to get the nut or the bolt started, I accidentally popped this off the tack weld, and obviously when the tack weld pops off, I just treated this as a normal nut, used a crescent wrench like this, held it in place, and it installed perfectly. So before we get this on the Jeep, to save ourselves the headache, I'm just gonna take the Dremel and Dremel through these tack welds and save ourselves the headache in about 20 to 30 minutes that we'd suffer under there on the creeper. Okay, I've got these 2 nuts that were problems Dremeled off. These were the 2 that were okay, and they have plenty of space to get the bolt through. I can now simply place this when we go to install the step bolts, and it'll be a lot easier than having to fiddle with it forever. So if you're doing this at home, check these alignments, make sure you can get, you know, a bolt through here. I've already checked all of these bolts, go in all of these holes already just fine, so nothing else needs changing except for those 2. I'm going to go ahead, hop under the Jeep next. I almost said truck. Hop under the Jeep next and start breaking loose the body bolts. Now when you get going on these guys, it says, you know, back them out and then go back the way it came, a quarter turn, and continue backing them out, simply because they're under so much tension, so much torque. You don't want to risk damaging threads on the way out. So go slowly with these guys, and you don't really need to go too much, just enough to get the about 3 millimeters of clearance between 3 or 4 millimeters of clearance between the bracket, between this
bolt here and this washer. This right here is a washer that it's going to slide under. This is the bolt with the flange head that it's going to slide on top of. So really you just need to clear a couple millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and break these loose and come back with you when I'm done with that. Okay guys, here is a perfect example. I'm working on the middle one, and this is the washer it's supposed to go underneath. This is the nut it's supposed to go above. Put this in here, and there's not enough room, even if I smack on it with the rubber mallet. Now, what the instructions tell you to do, and let me sort of illustrate what it is that we're looking at here. You won't be able to pass over those threads, so no matter how far you back it out, this bolt out, it's not going to go up any higher. So clearance the bracket for the step. So it tells you to file down the thread. So if you can get a file in here and file the thread back, then you'll be able to push this up another couple of millimeters, giving yourself clearance for the bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and meet up with you once I've finally finished it. Okay, that took a fair bit of doing and some hitting with a rubber mallet. The bracket is in. It is above the flange bolt, and the washer is now above it, and very little room between it and the body mount. So the filing was indeed necessary for this one. The other side, the middle bracket was the only bracket that was hard. It required me to use a mallet, but I didn't need to file. Hopefully I won't need a file for this one either. So I'm going to go ahead and break this one break this one loose and get the third bracket attached. Okay, I've got the third bracket on. It took a little filing as well, but fortunately it wasn't anywhere near as much filing as the middle bracket. Brackets are on. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which will be to mount the protective strip along here. I've been using 2-inch painter's tape and lining it up so that the top edge of the tape is just shy of the door on the door gap, and then the tape will naturally fall to this level, and that's where I'm putting the top edge of the strip. Now what that looks like over here allows about half of the rubber to be proud of this top step. It gives a generous amount of space in case, a rock gets up here. It won't, be kicked by your foot onto this area right in here. It also prevents any kind of dust, dirt, and debris from building up right in here had this been lower or flush with this. So again, this was just a personal preference for me. I think they say in the instructions about 1 3/4 down. I just chose right here. You can go flush with this guy by going maybe 2.5 inches as opposed to 2, or maybe 2 inches, 2 1/4 inches. I'm going just shy of 2. It's like 1 7/8 on the painter's tape. If you go 2 1/4, this will be much closer to flush, but it would be really hard to do without actually first mocking this up and bolting it down. Once you put this on the pinch weld bolts and you tighten the body bolts, the whole thing gets lifted up a little bit. So come up with what you want to do before you do it, and then I just chose that I wanted to have a little bit proud, and I think it's a nice look, and it'll keep the paint, I think, better protected this way. So we're gonna go ahead and move around to the other side, get the strip on, and I'll show you what that looks like by itself. Okay, we've got the strip now on, rubber side up. If you have a second person, it definitely helps. Otherwise, you can hold it in place with some more tape. The next step is to remove this bolt and this bolt. They're both 10 millimeters. However, they are slightly oversized given the layer of paint. I've found a 12-point socket fits over these 10 millimeters better than a 6, just to accommodate the paint. Break them loose. This one will be hidden behind the step itself. This one will be visible, so try to keep as much paint on that one as you can. And then we'll get these off, and then we'll start putting the step up here next. Okay, we're getting ready to put the passenger side step on. It has has itself conveniently labeled. Here is the motor and controller. It says before you mount this in the back, this is the side that goes in the back rather, to run this harness through this opening, and then you will also at the same time pass the, they call it the circuit board connector, through this harness to connect to here. So I'm going to walk this over to the Jeep, and my wife and I are going to sort of scoot underneath this with our legs and lift this into place. These two bolts, and this bolt and that bolt, so there's a total of 6 bolts, enter the pinch seam weld. And you'll notice if you look carefully, this bolt is larger than this one. So there's, I think, 2 small bolts at the very end, and the middle 4 are of a larger diameter. Sorry, this is the larger one, that's the smaller one. This is the smaller one, that's the larger one. So this one, these 2, and this outer one are the bigger ones, and the 2 smaller ones over there. Anyway, those 6 studs go into the pinch seam, and then these are the holes that will connect to the bracket that I was dremeling earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted on the Jeep and then meet back up with you once we're securing it in place. Okay, we ran into the same problem placing these studs into these holes that we did on the other side, and that's this hole in the pinch weld has this area here in the way. These studs want to try and enter the hole through right about here. So I'm going to have to drill the bottoms out of this one, maybe this one a little bit, and this one. The other side we only had to drill these 2, so it shouldn't take too long. Start off with a pilot bit. Okay guys, we've got the step put in place on the right side now, but ran into our first major pain in the ass fitment issue. Unfortunately, I guess on the 4xe, this bracket, I guess on the 4xe, because I don't really see any other Jeeps having this issue. There is this giant bracket here that doesn't seem to be accounted for in the design of this rock slide step rail. And there were 2 options: is either notch the bracket, except the bracket continues back, or notch the step, and the step obviously was easier, it's thinner gauge steel. So I started this notch here in the step. I only had to eat into this hole here. Basically I started this with a Dremel and then went the rest of the way with a hacksaw. It's much quicker actually, believe it or not, with a hacksaw. And clearance that, so now we have enough clearance, and now we just got to get the pinch seam bolts, these bigger bolts, and then the body bolts, and the step will be done. Okay, I have all the bolts tightened. Body bolts are torqued to 80 foot-pounds. Next thing I'm going to do is take these black little plugs and put them in these holes here. This is where the next step I'm going to do is put this pinch weld bolt back. And this is where you want to tighten the body bolts first. If you don't, this will be too low to thread the pinch weld bolt through. And then I recommend tightening this with like a hand crescent wrench or something, just to minimize any chipping of the paint, if you care about that. If not, just go nuts with a power tool. The other pinch weld bolt is behind here. I recommend opening this step up once you have power on it, going to the override switch and then overriding this off, and then and only then working on this. You don't want to risk it closing on you. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that and show you what this looks like with the pinch weld bolts tight. Alright guys, that is job done. Steps are installed. If you open up this door, steps drop out. You have a nice little step here and in. It's very ergonomic, pretty easy to get used to. You even have the option of stepping on this if you want to get up on the roof for any reason, so that is quite helpful. Steps close once your door is shut. That is Rock Slide Gen 3 step sliders installed. So if you enjoyed the video, found it helpful, subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on, and as always, stay tuned for more.